Kevin Sanders, thank you so much for joining me in this interview. Welcome to my channel.
You
And
are welcome. It's good to be here.
yeah, for those of you who are watching, Kevin, or Kuya Kevin, as he was known in the Philippines, we've into each other several times. We were both working as Christian youth ministers. He's a pastor. Well, I'm not, but I've been working with the youth ministries of the United Methodist Church in the Philippines. So he has lived in the Philippines for a significant number of years. I'll let him
About
tell
11
us.
years.
Oh, 11 years.
11 years
Wow.
I was there. Yeah.
Wow, 11 years. And so he has published, I think, two books or maybe more.
hmm
And then he has run a radio program in the Philippines and just a ministry with young people and students. And so, um, Kuya Kevin, would you mind sharing what life was like for you in the Philippines?
Sure. Yeah. It was, it was amazing when I came to the Philippines. That was July 11th, 2002 is when I arrived there. It was it's interesting because it was my first time to ever leave American soil. And so, yeah, I arrived there and I remember showing up to the airport. My supervisor and some of the other missionaries were there to greet me. And the humidity of the Philippines just kind of was on me like a cloak. And I just, I looked around and I said, boy, this is a different world. This is different than anything I've ever experienced before. Uh, but the interesting thing, and I remember even my supervisor, my ministry supervisor, noticed this. He had been a missionary for decades. I just took to the place very quickly. I never. Some people call culture shock or cultural stress. I never really had a very hard experience with that. I was 30 years old at the time, and I think I was just ready to experience something new and different. And so a lot of the, a lot of it I just soaked up like a sponge. The language, the culture. Uh, I've never eaten balut. I don't think I ever will, but
Oh, you've missed a lot then.
well, the funny thing is about half of my Filipino friends did not like balut.
Mm.
And so I'm kind of thinking, if half of you don't like it, then why do I have to eat it to be a true
Well,
Filipino, So I
fair enough.
I never ate it. So yeah, I was there I spent 9 years about roughly 9 years in Manila, really in the heart of Manila, as in Mismong Manila, Manila proper. Uh, I was in the university belt, working with students, doing ministry, and so we met during that time, and I had the opportunity to write a couple of books. I guess I think they're both still in print. You could go to kuyakevin.com, and which goes to kevinsanders.org, and and check those out. But yeah, it was an incredible, fun season of ministry for me. There's just really not a whole lot bad I mean, there's problems when you live in a city. I think the heat and the traffic were two things that I'm thinking, if I could just get rid of one of those, either the heat or the traffic, always hot, lagging mainit, but otherwise, I really had a blast my whole time there. So,
Yeah. The traffic is just really bad, for I think I used to have a radio program at FEBC2 at DZAS,
mhm.
and just a 10-kilometer stretch, maybe 12. It
Mm,
took me an hour and a half and just 2 hours to get through it along EDSA. So
mhm.
it's crazy. And I mean,
Yeah, part of what I did, is one thing that helped me is Now, my rent was expensive, but my whole time ministry in the Manila, I was able to live kind of right there in the U-Belt.
Mm.
And so that meant I never had a really long commute. In fact, one of the schools I worked with for a while was walking distance from my apartment, or a condominium, as they would call it there. And so that helped a lot. If I was having to do 1 and 2 hour commutes a day, I don't know, I would have maybe I wouldn't have lasted 9 years. I'm not sure. But speaking of which, I'll tell you something that was really funny, and I don't want to get too far ahead, but when my wife and I moved here, as you know, we have interstates here.
Right.
And 3, 4, or 5 lanes. And not long after my wife and I arrived here, we went on this long road trip. And I remember telling my wife, this is going to be glorious. Just watch this. And so we get on this 4-lane interstate, and we're going 70 miles an hour. And I'm like, this is beautiful, isn't it? It's just, you can go, so, but yeah, after, as you mentioned, I had the chance to write books and did a lot of student ministry there in Manila. And then I eventually moved to Angeles City because a friend of mine named Erwin was starting a church there, and I just felt like it was time for a move. And Erwin and I, by the way, are about to restart the Basta Love Life podcast, but it's going to be purely Facebook. We're not going to try to do radio this time. So yeah, that's my last roughly 1.5 to 2 years, I forgot exactly, was spent in Angeles City. And so that was great too. It was a different experience, different from Manila. My rent was cut in half immediately, which was nice.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, I really, I love my life right now. I'm very blessed right now, but to this day, I do miss, I miss the Philippines.
Yeah. So speaking of missing the Philippines, are there specific things that you do miss in the Philippines?
Well, I mean, if I were just to summarize it, it would be the people, the Filipino people, because I miss the people and the culture there, because the people were so warm and friendly and accepting towards me, and I just had a lot of fun there. But then there's certain things, as you know, when you move from one place to another, that it's kind of hard to say, to pinpoint exactly what is it that I miss about home, or in my case, what do I miss about the Philippines? Because I think of living in Angeles City and going on a nighttime jeepney ride down the road and just seeing all the little houses and karaoke's and sorry's. So yeah, it's the people, if I had to say one thing, but it's also just everything. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's kind of both.
Yeah. So you spent 11 years in the Philippines, and towards the tail end of that period, you went to Angeles City to help your friend plant a church. And I assume that's where you met your wife. So would you mind sharing how you and your wife met?
Sure. Well, it's interesting. The really short version is we met on Facebook. Now, at that point, I had been in the Philippines about 8, maybe 9 years. And when I moved to Angeles City, one of my wife's friends saw that I had posted about that on my blog, that, Kevin's moving to Angeles City. And my wife was not in Angeles City at the time. She was in Macau, but she had spent about 3 years working at an airline in Angeles City, because you got the Clark industrial zone and airport, and she had been in that industry. And so her friend said, Kuya Kevin is moving to Angeles City now, and I think he's still single. You should add him on Facebook. And
So there was a matchmaker.
yeah, and when she saw my blog at first, she thought I was a Filipino because Kuya Kevin,
Right.
And so I remember, I think it may have been the day that I arrived in Angeles, or the day after. I moved to Angeles City on All Saints Day because I knew there would be no traffic. I knew that we could get that moving truck out of Manila. So one day where you don't have any traffic. And but I look on Facebook and there's this gorgeous woman that's adding me on Facebook. And I'm kind of thinking, okay, there's, what in the world is she adding me for? I mean, she's got to have a husband or a boyfriend. She's gorgeous. And so I added her and I just said something like, thanks for the ad. And then we kind of began talking. And so I found out that, she was a believer in Christ like me. She didn't have a boyfriend. In fact, she had never had a boyfriend. And I was just, as we say in the States, smitten immediately. So we started talking on Skype. When I first added her and realized that she was in Macau, I was like, oh man, Sayang, she's far away from me. Do I really want to do long distance? But as you know, in Clark, you got airports, and there's Clark to Macau. So we began talking on Skype for a few days, and pretty quickly, I said, I need to go meet this girl because there's only so much I can know about her if we're just talking online. Although talking online, it went really well. It's like, I think there's something here, And so my wife, Mary Chris, she and I worked it out for me to go visit her in Macau. And bought a ticket, I'm right there near Clark Airport. And so I bought a ticket to go see her. Pardon. And I remember on the way to Macau, I'm thinking this is either going to be the best 3 days of 2011 or the most awkward 3 days of 2011. It's impossible that it's going to be, something in between. So yeah, I went there and met her, and we just really hit it off. And at the end of that time, those 3 days in Macau, this was December 2011, I said to myself, the next time I see this woman, I'm going to ask her to marry me. Wow. Whenever that is. And so, yeah, it worked out that by January, at that point in December, as soon as I left in December, I told her, anytime you want to come back to the Philippines, you just say the word and I'll buy you a ticket. No questions asked. And it's kind of a long story, but as it happened, it turned out that in January, she decided to come back to the Philippines about 2 months early. She had until March on the contract that she was working. And so, yeah, she came back, and I had been in the States for a few days, for a week or so, and I had already bought the engagement ring while I was in the U.S. And so she came back on her birthday in January, and then in the wee hours, madaling araw, the very next day, I asked her to be my wife, and she agreed, and she said yes. And so we were married a few weeks later in March of 2012. So yeah, that's how we met.
Yeah, that's the journey.
That's 8 years, so we're doing okay,
Yeah, and I think I saw on your website that you just celebrated celebrated with quotation marks. That's how you described it in your website. So
yeah, because of the situation we've had with this virus,
right.
I won't say the word because of YouTube's algorithms. There wasn't a whole lot we could do. My wife was actually she was not feeling good during that time. My sipuncha and stuff like that. And she had a coughing, sneezing. Yeah. So, but we did at least experience and you know, my son's birthday is the day after our anniversary. So those two kind of go together. So yeah.
Yeah. And also, I'm curious, how did you learn Tagalog? Because I know that when you were doing your ministries and speaking, you were speaking Tagalog, which is why, Filipinos, hindi ka nila pwedeng ibenta, sort of.
Yeah, yeah. I started with, I remember I was doing parang halo-halo approach. I was doing different things. Like I had this CD that I bought. It was ironically, I bought it in the U.S. and had my dad send it to me, and that at least just gave me kind of like a starting point. The problem with that CD was some of the way they constructed sentences in the CD is not the way people actually talk. Like, for example, I remember instead of darating na ako, which would be the way you would say it, it was like ako ay dumarating, and I think they were trying to make it like English or something. But that gave me a starting place, and I also to have like a foundation, you also have to build your vocabulary. So I remember carrying, this was maybe a few months after I got there, that CD, I believe it helped because it had like some commonly used words, and I would just carry flashcards with me all the time and just, English Tagalog, and just so you learn 5 or 10 words a day, and then you learn to add 5 or 10 words the next day, and you just keep doing that. So I achieved a certain level of functionality with the language, and then it would have been my first April and May in the Philippines. I was able to go to language school, and I had a fantastic teacher named Faye. Maybe she'll watch this, and I said, please teach me the verbs. I said, if I can learn the verbs, I'll know this language, because verbs are so beautiful and do all this interesting stuff in Tagalog, and that's really what we focused on. And so after that, because I was, I guess you could say, functional, she didn't have to start off with just she was parang boot camp. I mean, we were really able to go after it very intensely. And so, yeah, that helped me get she helped me take it at a really different level, from functional to, maybe functionally fluent, so,
right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think for most Filipinos too, because we try to communicate in English with Americans and foreigners, and so it's I wouldn't say quite a shock, but it's sometimes quite a surprise when somebody talks back in Filipino too.
Yeah, the last time the last time my wife and I went to the Philippines in September 2016, we were at SM Clark, and I couldn't remember where the bathroom was, and so I approached, all the little booths, and I just said, something like, pwede magtanong, saan ba yung pinakamalapit na CR? That's a bunch of syllables, and
right.
And as I'm saying that sentence, I remember the lady in the little booth is just going, as the sentence goes on, after I had been, at that point I'd been back a couple of days, and it was really flowing, so the language. So yeah, it is fun.
Yeah. Just wanted to shift gears a bit, since you went back to the US after spending 11 years in the Philippines. So how was the re-entry like? Did you experience anything like a reverse culture shock, or any challenges you met in the re-entry?
Yeah. Yeah, you do have what's called reverse culture shock when you come back, and I'm trying to think of some of what surprised me. Of course, I mentioned to you the being able to drive so
Right.
fast. You know,
And maybe to help you out, I think I can share some of my
sure, sure.
culture shock when we
Mm-hmm.
moved here in 2015. It's like, I mean, you, I needed to unlearn and relearn so many things that I just took for granted in the
Mm-hmm.
Philippines. Like, say, for example, one thing I remember was that the very first time I had to pump gas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I pulled up in this car that I borrowed from my boss, and so I'm like, okay, should be simple. Put in your card, and it's like, oh, nobody's coming to
Mm-hmm.
to help me out. So I just needed to do it myself, and so I had to do like a quick Google search, like, okay, how do I do this? So
You had to look it up on YouTube, huh?
yeah, that's right, that's right. So, but there's so many little things.
Yeah, or here's another couple of examples. When I moved to the Philippines and you eat at a fast food restaurant, you do not throw away your own trash. Because in the Philippines, if you go to Jollibee and you throw away your own food, you're taking somebody's job from them.
Hmm.
But here, as you've seen, you eat and there's not somebody uh, cleaning tables every 5 minutes, or even going to the store. You probably remember this. I remember if I would go shopping at SM, uh, you may have two or three people helping you pick stuff out, two or three store attendants, which that got interesting one time when I was looking for underwear. I had three or four women around me. I'm kind of like, can I have a little privacy here?
Right.
But in the U.S. Here, you go to Walmart or somewhere, if you need help, you're going to have to maybe find somebody wearing the uniform. Okay, where is this? So yeah, there were a lot of little things that I had to uh, relearn, and the technology and especially the online buying stuff online has just accelerated here in the U.S. Um, Stuff like, for example, video streaming that was not available really when I left in 2002. But now there's so many different ways like YouTube and video streaming to consume media. So yeah, there was a lot of getting used to for both me and my wife, and of course, I tried to be conscientious of telling my wife, navigating this with her and saying, by the way, here's how we do it here.
Mm.
Here's what you need to know. So, but yeah, even for me, it was an adjustment.
Yeah. And so, since your wife is Filipino and you're very much an American,
Hmm.
what is it like in um, both of you having different nationalities and of course some cultural differences?
Hmm.
Can you share some of the challenges that you've met in the relationship and how you navigated that?
Sure, sure. I mean, I think we started off with two very distinct advantages. One, of course, me being in the Philippines for so long, uh, I obviously had a pretty good grasp of Filipino culture. Now, you never really, I don't know that we ever really turn into another culture, but I was as close to a Filipino maybe as you could get without being one, if you see what I'm saying. So,
Right.
and even from my wife's perspective, uh, she had worked with a lot of Westerners when she was working for the airline, and she had been in Macau. Macau, of course, is part of Asia, but that's still being pulled out of your own country. Um, and, you never realize how much culture influences you until you're removed from your
Mm.
culture, and then you like, whoa, these people are not behaving the same way I behave. So that I think was a very good starting point for us. as far as how we navigated as me being an American and her being a Filipina, a lot of that I think just kind of goes into you respect each other's culture and you try to find a compromise in different areas. So, for example, my wife still cooks a lot of Filipino. We have a rice cooker at home. Now,
of course.
if it was just me, I never would probably own a rice cooker. So we've got a rice cooker, and so she cooks a lot of Filipino food, which is fine with me. I like Filipino food. It could be that if I didn't like it, that would be a more difficult to navigate. I think when we're talking about Filipino American marriages, and I think this is an OFW or in your case a Filipino American issue in general, is one of the issues that comes up is navigating the whole thing with in-laws, and in particular money. Because this is something you've probably learned since you've been here, but Filipinos, I think, that I met tended to have this misconception that in America, they overestimate the individuality. It's there, but a lot of Filipinos that I would meet would have this idea that here in America, once you turn 18, you just leave the house and never speak to your parents again. I'm exaggerating, but it was almost that. And it's a little more complex than that, of course. But the way I explain it is, in your typical middle-class American culture, the money flows from older to younger. So, for example, I'm pursuing a doctorate right now. My dad has helped me out with tuition. I'm not too proud to say that. He's helped me out. Now, my dad's perspective is, son, I am financially stable, and one day when I'm gone, you're going to inherit what I have anyway. So I would like to see you enjoy it now while I'm alive. So of course, my dad would also buy stuff, gifts or whatever for my grandson. So it typically goes from older to younger. Okay. In Filipino families, it's a lot more complicated than that, as you know. In other words, if in many cases, if a Filipino, depending on class and other issues, if a Filipino becomes successful, then he or she may help his siblings. You've got money going across that generation. For example, when my wife was only 19, she had graduated and began working, and she was helping with her siblings' expenses.
That's definitely the case with me and my younger sister as well. We were supporting our younger brother as he went through college, and I mean, my younger brother even stayed with me and my wife. Together with my wife's brother. So even when we got married, we still didn't have kids. It wasn't just the two of us at home. Yeah. There was two other young men staying with us and going through college and helping them out.
And so what we've done is we have tried to make compromises. So, for example, when we lived in the Philippines, it was just the two of us in our apartment. We did not have family living with us, and we just decided that was best for us. Now, we would have them come visit us, but and so now that we're here, when you're talking about the financial aspect, for me as an American to just say, no, we're never going to help the family. Well, to me, that would be very culturally insensitive. But for her to say, oh, we're going to just always be giving no matter what impact that may have on us, that would be insensitive on the other side. So we simply discuss it. My wife and I see each other as a team, and we're the main team. Everybody else is outside of the main team, including our son. And so we just discuss it, and um, we do our best to help when and how we can. And my wife's family would best be described as middle class, so it's not like, it's not like there are constant needs. But I'll give you an example, and I don't think my wife would mind me sharing this. But we had a death in her family a few months ago, and that particular relative had multiple medical issues, and so lots of bills, hospital bill, funeral bill. So did we help? Of course we helped. Now, we did not go into debt here in the United States to help. We helped as much as we could, and then other family members helped as much as they could. So it was that's kind of how we navigate that, or if let's say there was a family member who needed some help. Let's say one of my wife's siblings wants to get enrolled in a training program to go to work, and there's some expenses there. Then we would help with that as much as we can. So I really think the key is to kind of see it is to find a compromise. There are cases, I believe, in which the American spouse just wants the Filipina to act like an American, and that's not healthy. There are other cases, I think, where maybe the Filipina expects an American spouse to fully act like, Pinoy shy, and that's not the case either. So I think it's finding that. Hopefully, I'm making sense. I think it's finding a middle ground. You help, but you also have boundaries too.
Yeah, and of course, money in many different ways can be a source of conflict in
Sure.
any relationship, whether that's in marriage, in organizations, even.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also touches into some of the broader issues that overseas Filipinos are facing, and sometimes the demands from family, extended family can sometimes, they'd be asking so many things without regard for the capability of the overseas Filipino. And so part of it too is that helping our Filipino, overseas Filipinos to learn how to say no.
Yes.
And to have a sense of, okay, this is really only what I can provide at this time. So, but
I did a YouTube video, I think one time, called why some OFWs go broke. And I was a little concerned. I'm like, okay, are people going to be offended by but I had quite a few Filipinos say, yeah, this is what happens, if the family demands too much and it's unrealistic, and then there are some OFWs that come back to the Philippines with nothing because of these issues we're talking about, not being able to say no, not being able to do a little bit of planning, to keeping boundaries, that kind of thing.
Right. And I've also done some searches on YouTube, and I think I've seen some Filipinas talking about this particular issue. So there's a lot of videos trying to deal with the issue of sending money and navigating the relationship with when one of the spouse is an American. So,
Yeah.
So, and thank you for sharing that, Kuya Kevin.
Sure.
And I'm glad you're able to navigate that. I think I like the concept of understanding the family as a team, and that decisions are made, boundaries are set, and so that's keeping finances and relationships healthy, I believe. So.
Yeah, it even kind of, if you think about, I don't know how many of your viewers, read the scriptures, but it even goes back to Genesis. A man will leave his father and mother and cleave to his spouse. So, I love my in-laws, my Filipino in-laws. My wife loves her American in-laws, so we love them, but we recognize that she and I are the main team, and everybody else is, not on the main team,
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of some cultural differences, I just remember this. One time I was on a layover in Japan on the way
Hmm.
to the US, and I heard two American guys. I think both of them were married to, their spouses were Filipinas.
Hmm.
And one of them started talking about some of the food that he likes some of, Filipino food. But one thing that he could not stand was the smell of bagoong.
Bagon.
That thick brown fish
Hmm.
paste. So, and I mean, it's also a running joke among the Filipino communities or Filipino friends here that do not fry
Tuyo.
dried fish tuyo
Yeah.
outside when the neighbors can smell it.
Yeah. My wife, uh, my wife cooks that everyone. It seemed like when she was pregnant, she really craved it a lot, and she cooks it sometimes. And yeah, it makes the house stink, but I don't care. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't care.
So yeah, married life is fun.
Hmm.
Adjusting to each other's quirks and personalities and things like that. But I want to ask you now about the first time that you learned that you were going to be a father. How did that feel like for you?
Well, that was awesome because I mean, I think I didn't marry till I was 39, and then it took. So I think even that makes. I think maybe it gives me an extra appreciation for being married. And then it's kind of a long story, but it took us a long time when we moved here to the U.S. for me to get established in a ministry slash career. So that delayed things even further. And so yeah, we started around. I had to ask my wife this question last night. I was like, "Now, when did we start trying as the practicing?" And uh, we started trying in December after I've been here in El Paso since October 2016. So once we kind of settled in, that December is when we were starting to try to have a baby. And it took us a little bit longer than I expected. It took about, because it was July when she got pregnant.
Mm.
And so as time went on, we started, uh, I won't get into too much detail, but the ovulation test, some things that people do to know when to redouble the efforts. And so, yeah, when my wife got pregnant, I was elated. I was just so happy. In fact, in my office at home, I still have the two pregnancy positive tests. The line is faded there. And I even remember that in my journal, I sensed that God was telling me we were going to have a boy. Now I'm careful with the God told me because people can get very strange with that, but
Right.
and so I wrote down Clark because that's the name my wife and I had already agreed on if we were having a boy, and so yeah, it was just yeah, I was thrilled. And then when we did the ultrasound, as soon as they put the instrument on my wife's belly, my son was in a position where his gender was very
Mm.
obvious. I'll just and so in fact she pulled it away and said, "Do you guys want to know what you're having?" And we both said, "We think we know because we saw it on the screen." And so I didn't care what we were having, uh, but it was really special to me that it seemed like what the Lord told me is what was coming to pass. So yeah, I was excited. The congregation here was excited. So very, very joyous news for certain.
Yeah, and you've had a boy.
Hmm.
Both of our sons right now are boys, and
Hmm.
the third one that we're expecting is also going to be a boy.
Oh
And
wow, okay. House full, yeah.
it's kind of crazy, and
Hmm.
one of the best things I keep telling my friends, the best things of having boys, you get to play with cars all over again, Hot Wheels,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
trains, and some tracks. We've even built like a homemade track here at home, so it's
Mm-hmm.
lots of fun. And so,
Yeah.
for you, what's been some of the I would say precious moments that you've enjoyed with your son?
Well, I remember. Yeah, I still remember when he was first born. We had to do the C-section route, which means I'm kind of with my wife hiding behind a curtain and didn't look around the curtain. I was afraid I might faint because they're doing all kind of stuff over there. But he was bigger than the doctor. He was nearly 9 pounds,
Oh wow.
8.73 pounds, and so which surprised the doctor. He didn't think that Clark was that big. And I remember they pulled Clark out and let me take a picture, and I see this thick black hair, and I say, "Praise God, he looks like his mama." um, and so yeah, it's just all these milestones that I can think about. The first time he turned over, I remember when he started walking. When he first started walking, he could not do it on his own. So his thing was he would come up to us on the couch and grab one of our fingers because he wanted to practice walking, but he couldn't balance on his own. So, uh, yeah, I mean, as you know, they're just too many milestones, I think, to name when you have kids. It's just amazing. It's such a blessed um, privilege to be a dad.
Yeah. Um, part of it too. Sometimes you get scared. Sometimes worried about, oh, I'm tasked with this awesome and
Hmm.
sometimes intimidating responsibility of
Yeah.
rearing this young person to become a responsible adult in the future.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, what have you been learning about yourself, about being a father with this journey?
I think one of the first things that I've learned is just how precious time is, and that's kind of come across in two ways. First, after Clark was born, and during those first few weeks, especially, I began thinking, what did I do with all my time before I became a dad? Because I was like, I don't have really. I'm like this, because when they're so little, just the attention that they need is constant. You or your wife, one just have, and really, I was like, boy, what did I do when I had all that free time? Because I don't seem to have any right now, you know. And just in the second way, time is precious because it goes by so quickly. Because I remember we always joke about how my son used to be, how Clark used to be, we called him a little burrito because, you
Mm,
wrap him up in those blankets like a burrito. And wow, that's where he was. And now he's running and climbing all over the house, and he's a tall boy. He can reach pretty much every light switch in our house, which
mm,
makes things interesting, and it's just even though you're dealing with the sleep deprivation, the puyat, all the time. At the time, sometimes it feels like it's going by slow, but then you blink, and
right.
he's a toddler already. And so I think how precious time is, and secondly, just I think the desire I have to just to be a man that my son can look up to. We do have a fatherhood crisis in the world and in this country. In fact, uh, some of I don't know how much you've studied this, but the single greatest predictor of criminality, and this goes across racial lines, socioeconomic lines, is the absence or the presence of the father in the home. That's the single most. If the father is not there, the negative consequences, potential criminal behavior, poor school performance, all those things are, the chances of that happening are much greater. And so I think for me, being a dad has really pushed me just to kind of, this is going to sound corny, but just step my game up in every aspect. This, I mentioned that I'm working on a doctoral degree right now, and which to me, it's been a little crazy. I've questioned my sanity for pursuing this about the same time my son was born. I'm like, but being a husband and a father, I think has really pushed me to do this. I'm not sure I would have done this if I was not married and then a father too. So I think, being a man that a man of integrity, a man of character, a man of strength, a man of courage. I think about all that I want to instill in my son and then any other children we may have in the future, that I think about that a whole lot, because it's so important. It's something that's unfortunately becoming something that's missing. I even see this in the Philippines too, because you see a lot of single moms now in the Philippines, and I'm not trying to discourage single moms in any way. My dad grew up without a father because his father died when my dad was 3 years old, and so my grandmother did it. So I'm not trying to discourage single moms, but I just see that we have such a crisis of fatherhood and manhood and what it means to be a man in our society.
Right. And yes, and sometimes the examples again in society tend to not favor a lot of good fathers. I mean, the portrayal of fathers sometimes is not very good in many different ways, in media, in books, and things like that. And so sometimes I think for Christians there are a lot of examples of fathers that good, whether they are in some of the congregations, in personal relationships, like mentors who are father figures to us. But I think that if we are able to show some examples, especially to our sons, to our daughters, I think that would be that would honor this responsibility that's entrusted to us.
Yeah, I agree completely. And so and I'm not sure that sometimes it's intimidating, but from day to day, it's just, I think it's just such a joy. And, back to the time thing, I have to remind myself that, and I think I generally keep a good balance and perspective here, but I just have to remind myself, I only get to be my son's father one time, I mean, obviously I'll always be his dad, but you see what I'm saying? These childhood years, these formative years, if I miss it, then I can't go back and undo. If there's damage or neglect done, then I can't go back and undo that, and so to me, that's more important than anything. When I was in Manila, I was still single. And so it was kind of have Bible, will travel. And so, church calls me and says, can you come? Then I didn't really have to be concerned with, okay, am I taking time away from family? And that was okay for that season, but I do my best to recognize that I'm not in that season of life anymore. I'm in a different season. And to me, all the ministry in the world to me would mean nothing if I fail as a father, and so that's failing as a husband and a father is one thing that it's like I refuse to do it. I refuse to fail in that. I'll fail in some other parts of my life if I have to, but hope I don't have to. But if I have to choose, I'm not willing to fail at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an honor, a privilege to be a father, to be a husband. So
yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
Right. So, Kuya Kevin, if there is maybe one piece of wisdom that you can share with younger fathers, whether they're Filipinos or Filipino Americans or even Americans, I would say, what would you say to them?
Well, it would maybe a repetition of what I've already said is remember you only have one opportunity at this, and and remember that as a dad, everyone in your family is looking at you, and you are their answer to what is a man. They're looking to you. A boy, okay, what is a man? What should I be like when I grow up? They look to the father. A girl, what is a man? What kind of man? What should I expect one day when I want to get married? What kind of man should I look for? What is a man? It's the father, and like it or not, that's whatever you are is your answer for that question, And so if your house is not in order, if your life is not in order, if your life is not honoring God, then repent and change that while you still have time. So the answer for what is a man is a good answer.
Thank you, Kuya Kevin.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah, if people want to go to your YouTube channel and see your writings at your blog, where should they go?
Probably the best place right now would just be my blog, which is kuyakevin.com or kevinsanders.org. The YouTube channel is geared a little bit more towards it's kind of geared more towards, I guess, expats to a certain extent. It's about Filipino culture, but you can also look me up on YouTube and see you can hear some of my Baroque Tagalog as I'm walking through Pangasinan, but yeah, kevinsanders.org or kuyakevin.com, and you can even find some of the books that I've written there available in the Philippines, and my other social accounts are linked to that blog, I think.
All right. Okay, Kevin, thank you so much.
Thank you.